All right, let's take you to our breaking news now. The Southern African Development Community says a summit of regional heads of state has terminated the mandate of its troops deployment in the DRC. The soldiers will be withdrawn in phases. Joining us for some reaction is Dean Wingrin, who is a defense analyst. Dean, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, quite the news. I don't know if you were expecting something like this and what your initial reaction is just hearing of it.
Yes, good afternoon. And for those of us who have been following the issues with what's been happening over the last few months, it hasn't come entirely as a surprise. The summit a few weeks ago of the heads of defense of the contributing countries and of the SADC, EAC, also noted the difficulties of executing the mandate of the SADC mission in the DRC, and mentioned the difficulties that since Goma, Sake, and even towns in other towns in other provinces in the eastern DRC have been taken over by M23 and the Rwandan-backed rebels, that it's essentially the SADC mission is its hands are tied, and so we were waiting for this morning's results of the meeting, and I think it was the right decision.
Yeah, what's interesting, though, is the debate here in South Africa has been whether or not to withdraw our troops from the DRC. In fact, just yesterday, Dean, the finance minister in that budget speech also, giving quite the allocation for defense. In fact, let's listen to what the finance minister had to say.
0.4 billion is allocated to fund the Defence Force and correctional services. Over the medium term, 5 billion has been allocated to the Department of Defence to support South Africa's participation in the SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo and to supplement existing peacekeeping activities.
So billions allocated there to defense. Dean, what happens now to that money?
Yes, I think it's important to note that this allocation is not to the defense budget itself, but is specifically earmarked for South Africa's mission in the DRC. So the 5 billion is split over the 3-year period of the medium-term financing framework. And I understand that it's roughly about 1.8 million was allocated for this first year. Now, with the mission drawing down, I don't think this full allocation will be used, but it certainly must be used for withdrawal of the troops, which is quite an expensive exercise. And any funds left over will probably be handed back to Treasury for reallocation. But even with the withdrawal of the SADC mission, we still have, South Africa is still part of the UN mission in the Eastern DRC. South Africa is part of the Force Intervention Brigade there. We're providing troops, we're providing helicopters, the Oryx transport helicopter as well. So that mission is still continuing for the time being. The UN was meant to also withdraw that mission at the end of the last year, and at the very last minute they extended that mission. So we're still awaiting a decision by the UN, as well as by the dozens of contributing countries to that mission, as to what is going to happen there. And obviously that also still needs to be funded.
Yeah. What we're hearing, though, is that this withdrawal of this mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo will be in various phases. So perhaps you can talk to us about how you foresee that playing out, the withdrawal in phases.
Yes, well, I think the first stage is going to be the most difficult. Our troops in Sake and slightly north in the capital of North Kivu in Goma, they are surrounded by the M23 rebels. So they're not going anywhere very quickly. So the first thing will have to be done now is negotiated.
All right, just a second, Dean, needing to interrupt that as we bring you live visuals from Cape Town now, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is, of course, set to co-chair the 8th South Africa European Council Summit. This gathering comes amidst growing tensions with the United States. So let's listen in as he makes that arrival, and we'll continue that chat in a moment.
Good to meet you. Great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Oh, come on. Everyone's gone forward.
These guys want to photograph you.
Yes. Want you and me.
They want us here for the photograph.
Can you just stay down? Just stay down, guys, in the front.
They all come for you. No. And a little bit for you and me. They never saw this way, and we never see these pictures.
You always wonder where they go.
Beautiful.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, a photo up there for the leaders of this all-important gathering where, of course, we are seeing President Cyril Ramaphosa co-chairing the 8th South Africa and EU Summit with the President of the European Council, Mr. Antonio Luis Santos da Costa, and the President of the European Commission, Dr. Ursula von der Leyen. This all playing out in Cape Town, a range of issues that are set to be looked at, of course, many of them having to do with the geopolitical shifts, but also some agreements around energy transition, supply chains, critical mineral resources, and also some knowledge sharing where education, science and innovation are concerned. And so we'll be bringing you coverage as that summit plays out in Cape Town. Stay with us here on Channel 405. Well, we continue that chat with Dean. Dean, apologies for that, needing, of course, to dip into Cape Town for a moment. And I think also that speaking to just how much it is that South Africa has to deal with some of its foreign affairs at the moment. And when we see the withdrawal of troops that are part of this SADC mission of the Democratic Republic of Congo, what do you think that might mean for relations between South Africa and Rwanda at a time like this?
Well, that's a very good question. The relations between the two countries have been very testy lately since Goma fell to the rebels. And I'm glad to see that some of the heated rhetoric between the two presidents, Kagame and Ramaphosa, have been toned down. And it seems like quiet diplomacy has once again is on the go. But and this is where it's very important for the relations between the two countries, in that the rebel group is supported by Rwanda. The South African troops, as I mentioned before the break, are surrounded by the rebel groups. And that will inform what the next stages will be. Because up to now, the rebels have said that South African troops can go, but they must leave their equipment behind. Now, South Africa has got substantial quantities of equipment, not just lightly armored vehicles, and troop carriers and so on, but they've also got radars, anti-aircraft weapons, and so on. So there's equipment there that South Africa will find it very difficult to replace just because of the poor funding of the Defence Force, which yesterday took a back foot again. So while South Africa has waited until this SADC decision to wind down the force, now it can go ahead with proper negotiations, and hopefully Rwanda and the rebel groups, seeing that the mission has been terminated, will now allow South Africa to return the equipment. And if that is negotiated, it then brings another headache, is how do you bring that equipment back? Because up to now, the rebel groups have not opened Goma Airport. They say the runway has been damaged, and any repatriation of troops must go via Rwanda. So if it shouldn't be too difficult to repair the runway. So if South Africa is to repatriate the equipment, it's a very time-consuming process, and the only way that it can really be done is via airlift. And once again, an expensive exercise, as South Africa has no organic airlift of its own. So it has to charter in aircraft. Much as it took the equipment up to the DRC, it has to bring it back again, those 3,000 kilometers via air. And all this requires negotiation, and that then requires, cooperation of Rwanda. And you can then hopefully influence the rebel groups, for the use of Goma Airport.
Yeah.
But it's going to take time. It's not a quick thing.
Yeah, before I let you go, Dean, I mean, this one we need to squeeze in about what then happens on the ground after the phased withdrawal of SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo troops. Ultimately, we've seen some fighting with the M23 rebels and Congo militia in, I think it's in Nyabiondo, quite close to Goma, where this leaves civilians with this withdrawal the most vulnerable, Dean.
Yes, well, it leaves them in a very precarious position. At the moment, the SADC mission is there ever since. It's now been 50 days since the fateful day when, in those 2 days, when 14 South African soldiers were killed. And since then, the SADC mission, they haven't participated in any activity. It's all been the Congolese army and allied groupings with the Congolese army who've tried to staunch the rebels advance south as well as north, and they're having a difficult time. And I think this is President Tshisekedi of the Congo. It's his decision now exactly how he's going to do. Up to now, he's resisted negotiations with the rebel group. And I think he's now going to have to review his tactics. The UN is also not shown any inclination to re-enter the fighting. They are still forming trying to form a stopper group, not for the rebel groups to expand, but they're certainly not actively participating in the fighting. And it's going to leave any civilians in the Eastern DRC in a very difficult position. And I think what they will be doing, much like when they're taking over Goma and the other cities, towns, villages, as soon as the rebels arrive, their allegiance then falls to those rebels and they welcome them. Should the rebels move out and the Congolese army comes in, the civilians will once again support the new regime that is now in control of the village. And I think, that's the way that they survive, just go with the flow.